Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Welcome to episode 47 of the Meet the Parents podcast, and more chat from some of your favourite parenting bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm joined by Amie from Finding Our Feet and Vicky from Verily Victoria Vocalisers. Good evening, ladies.
Hello.
So on this week's podcast, we are going to talk about International Women's Day and the seemingly bottomless black hole that is the purchasing of baby products. The eagle-eyed, or should that be eagle-eared, among you will have noticed that my fellow panellists this week are both women. So I wanted to spend a few minutes throwing back to International Women's Day, which took place a couple of weeks ago. So this takes place on March the 8th every year, and every year it has a particular theme. So last year it focused on gender equality, allied to the slogan Planet 50-50 by 2030, which, if slightly tortuous linguistically, is at least clear enough in its meaning and represents an ambition I think any right-thinking individual can get behind. This year, the theme also ran alongside the Planet 50-50 by 2030 slogan and focused on women in the changing world of work with the associated hashtag #BeBoldForChange. There were lots of major events on the day all over the world to mark the event. So, have either of you been involved in any way with any of these events?
No, I haven't, to be honest. I just believe people are people. I don't see it as women, men. I know there's a gap that exists and I get it. I just feel like making a big deal out of it makes it even more. I just find it a strange subject. I mean, I don't disagree with it, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I don't actively partake.
I'm kind of the same. I feel like I should be the type of person who is all about International Women's Day, but it didn't pass me by, but it's certainly not something that I make a massive deal about. It's a difficult one, because obviously when you have a day like this, it also encourages a lot of conversations that aren't actually that helpful. Like there was a tweet by a female journalist in the UK the other day, but she basically said, never mind International Women's Day, what about Men Are Stupid, Shut Up Day, or something like that. And it just felt like, well, that's not progressing anything. It's not setting good role models. It's not helping women globally in any way, or even locally. And it's that sort of thing that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable about the day. I
just find that it's an excuse for some more extremists to go off the other end, and then it makes a mockery of what everybody's trying to achieve.
And I think as well, there's a lot of sort of pop culture clicktivist type stuff around these types of days. And, you know, it's lovely in a way. All the 16 to kind of 25-year-old girls have their photo with all their besties on Instagram, and they're just like, oh my God, hashtag love the girls, International Women's Day. And it's a bit like, yeah, I suppose that's where everyone starts somewhere in an educated conversation about these issues. And obviously a 16-year-old doesn't know necessarily what those big issues are. But it also makes me feel a bit like, guys, you know, come on. That's not what this is about.
Yeah, and like you say, it's everyone has to start somewhere, but it's actually quite similar to the discussion I was having with Simon and John last week about World Book Day, where you see lots of pictures of, you know, kids dressed up in their their Batman outfits or their Captain America suits, and you think, okay, actually, is this about World Book Day, or is it just Fancy Dress Day? And the meaning of the day and the event and what it's meant to represent sometimes gets a little bit lost, and it is a shame when you get some of these more extreme attitudes that come out either in the press or on social media, where the debate becomes less about how you bring everyone up to the same level in terms of equality, and it becomes more about how you drag everything down to some kind of lowest common denominator. And it is a real shame when that happens.
To be positive, however, I actually did see quite a few press releases about women who are business people, like high up in business, or entrepreneurs who've been successful. And as part of Be Bold for Change, they were actually offering free mentoring for, in some cases, 1 or 2, and in others, sort of 5 or 6 women around the country. And they were actually saying, you know, send me your business plan and I will give you tips. Here's my email, you know, it's open to anyone, kind of thing. I thought that was a brilliant use of the day and the hashtag, and kind of really galvanising the right things about the day.
There were a lot of really great events that were about celebrating a lot of the successes that there are for women in the world of work, and a lot of really good examples and a lot of initiatives that really are trying to drive positive change. Now, the World Economic Forum predicts that the gender gap in the key areas of health, education, economy and politics won't close entirely until 2186. So this year's campaign challenged people to take groundbreaking action to accelerate gender parity. So it was backed up by comments from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling for change by empowering women at all levels, enabling their voices to be heard and giving them control over their own lives and over the future of our world. Guterres also talked about how women's rights were being reduced, restricted and reversed, which are pretty strong words, really. I mean, Vicky, any thoughts in either as a mum specifically or as a woman generally about areas where there is a particularly urgent need to close the gender gap?
It's funny, I was thinking about this because I knew this was going to come up in our discussion, and I actually casted my mind back to quite a few years ago now, where I worked for a company. It was quite small to start with, they're big now. And the managing director walked into the office one day, and bearing in mind the workforce was 3 women and 1 guy at the time. And he turned around and he said, "Oh, the guy's the most important person in here because he needs the job more than a woman." And I just stood there with my mouth open. Hopefully he's changed his attitude now, but but I think that probably the most obvious area for me is the pay gap. I think if somebody's doing a specific job and a woman would get paid less than a man for that specific job, I think that's what needs addressing most of all. People should be assessed on their abilities rather than their gender.
I forget what the exact number is, but the gender gap between men and women doing similar jobs is something like 26% or something. It's certainly a very significant percentage, isn't it? I mean, Amie, how about you? We've spoken in the past on a number of occasions about some of the challenges that all parents, but particularly mums, face in the workplace following the birth of a child. I mean, what do you see as some of the most pressing things that need to change? And, what can both companies and individuals do to live up to that hashtag, Be Bold for Change?
There's 2 main things that I think. The first is I think the workplace culture needs to shift, and that's away from this idea that if you're there physically and you're there presently for sort of a 50-hour work week, you must be getting the job done and you must be worth the money, particularly in like law firms and ad agencies and those sort of heavy hour-based type jobs. We need to move to the culture that it's about the work you produce, not the amount of time you take to do it. A friend of mine is a lawyer in a London law firm, and she's on the track to be a partner by the time she's 30. But she's actually actively saying, I don't want that. Like she sees some of the female partners, they've got kids, they never see their kids cry for the nanny in the night, the real stereotypical stuff. She's suggesting she might kind of try and take a different tack with law because she's just like, that's not the life I want. I come from an advertising background and actively had to seek out ad agencies and a place of work that had a different culture, because especially once I came back from maternity leave, I didn't want to be in the office till 11 o'clock at night because the client said jump and I said, well, how high? I have a life and I value my life, and employers and workplaces need to start to do the same. And the second thing is I think there's a problem in society's perception of carers at the moment and the importance with that. And I don't just mean stay-at-home parents, I mean any kind of caring role. So whether you're looking after the elderly, you're a teacher, you're a nurse, you're a social worker, we don't, particularly in American and British culture, we don't class them as particularly important or well-respected professions. And stay-at-home parents or part-time workers in any industry also come under that, because you automatically make your family or whatever reason you're part-time an equal priority. Therefore, you must not value your job as highly. You must not be as good at it. And that's just wrong. Mm-hmm. And I am making generalizations here. I appreciate that. But you take Finland as an example. where the teachers are really well paid. They're actually really highly respected individuals in the community. And you could argue that their results speak for themselves. They are more engaged, they have all these kind of positive outcomes from education, and you sort of think, well, if we actually had an education system that wasn't suffering just obscene cuts as it is at the moment, how would that be different? I mean, these people are moulding the minds of the future of our country, effectively. They are making them good or bad people. They're educating them. That's a huge important job, and yet we're not giving them the tools they need to do it or the respect as individuals that they really deserve. There's a bit of a soapbox moment.
But you make some really good points there, and I think that the way society is structured and the kind of language we use and the way we regard different types of roles within the workplace and within the community do kind of reinforce some of those old-fashioned views, don't they? So, I mean, let's just touch quickly on some comments made by John Allen, chairman of Tesco, recently, in which he claimed that white men have become an endangered species on the boards of British companies amid the push to increase diversity in business. Now, he said, if you're female and from an ethnic background, and preferably both, then you are in an extremely propitious period. For 1,000 years, men have got most of these jobs. The pendulum has swung very significantly the other way now, and will do so for the foreseeable future. If you're a white male, tough. You're an endangered species and you're going to have to work twice as hard. Now, incidentally, all 11 of Tesco's board members are white and only 3 are female. And furthermore, of the UK's top 100 companies as represented by the FTSE 100, only 7 are led by women. Now, there's always a danger of these comments being taken out of context a little bit. But Vicky, any thoughts on that?
I read his article and I found it a bit hypocritical, or very hypocritical, but we don't, as you said, you don't know how much has been taken out of context, what's been twisted. And to be honest, I do think, there were years where women weren't prominent in the workplace, years and years and years. And, this whole situation is very young in comparison to how old the world is. So they're saying that only 7 of the top 100 companies in the UK are led by women. Well, yeah, but it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Funny enough, that's exactly what I think. And I think that people expect too much too quickly, which I hate myself in some ways for saying that, because I think we shouldn't have to wait at all. This is basic. But I remember when I used to work at a large UK telco, and we had a similar issue that only 2 members of the whole board were female. I think everyone was white. And there was this massive push by the company to try and raise female people higher up in the company, basically. And I kind of sat there and I thought, well, yeah, but also if the right people aren't there, I don't want you just putting women in these positions because you think that's what we want to see. I care more about the right people being in these positions. And equally, there is a generational difference. The generation that are currently sort of in their 40s, 50s, and maybe of traditional board age, unfortunately, there's just not as many women in the workforce at that age, potentially, as, say, in their 20s at the moment. And part of that is because, they've fallen away as they've had kids or whatever. And I think it'll be interesting to see the people who are sort of in their early 30s now having children, and maybe as they kind of return to their careers, how might that shift? And that's when we'll start to see the difference, I think, regardless of race. I'm talking more about gender at this point.
I think I agree with both of you, really, because I have to say I'm not a big fan of quotas or positive discrimination, whether it's in promotion of women, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, the LGBT community, or any other category. I mean, as you were saying earlier, Vicky, I mean, I'd like to hope that people are appointed on the basis of simply being the best candidate for the job. But clearly there is a big gap that needs to be bridged before we have true equality. And again, as you've both said, this is something that does take time. Now, whether the percentage of women that should sit in UK boardrooms is 50%, 40%, 60%, or whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. What matters most is that wherever a female executive is qualified for a job, she should have a fair shot at it. And then, the percentage is what the percentage is.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. It shouldn't come. You can't say right, it's 50% women, 50% men, because how do you know that those 50% men or women aren't going to be any good?
Finally, one of the major events that was associated with International Women's Day was the Catalyst Awards Conference in New York. Now, I suspect most people won't have heard of Catalyst before. They're a leading non-profit organisation with a mission to accelerate progress for women through workplace inclusion. Now, the reason I mention this particular event is because my company was one of this year's award winners, and I was actually on one of the panels that was interviewed as part of our assessment for the awards. So it's slightly unusual that of the three of us, it's me who's probably been the most involved in International Women's Day this year. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but I work for 3M, who are a science-based innovation company that makes everything from post-it notes and asthma inhalers to overhead electricity cables and high visibility road signage. But enough of the corporate brochure. As a science company, we're heavily involved in STEM initiatives, so that's science, technology, engineering and maths, and that's primarily with the aim of encouraging both more school kids and more women to enter these disciplines. So actually International Women's Day is a key part of our corporate efforts, and given that each of the three of us has a daughter who we hope will have every opportunity available to her that her male counterparts have, it's something that's of particular interest to me. And why shouldn't Cara or Grace or Little Miss dream of becoming a scientist or a doctor or a board member of a FTSE 100 company? I'd love to reach a point in our lifetimes where we no longer need an International Women's Day because gender parity has been achieved. Just imagine that. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And with the words of John Lennon ringing in our ears, let's move on. For reasons you will already be well aware of if you read her blog or are a regular podcast listener, Vicky recently went to the baby show at London's Excel Centre. Now, I'm well past the stage where I will ever again need to peruse baby products, but Vicky, tell us what it's like at the baby show. I take it it's quite a large event.
Yes, it is. Funny enough, it wasn't as big as I thought it would be, but that was a good thing because it was big enough, thanks. When you're walking around pregnant and, you're trying to take everything in, it can get a bit overwhelming. But it was great. I went on the Saturday, so it was particularly busy because I couldn't make it on the Friday, partly because Grace wanted to come with me. And of course, that's a school day. I know, bless her. She wanted to come and give out my cards and help me. So I took my mum and Grace and we went up for about 4 or 5 hours, and it was lovely, really big.
You've put up a post on your blog listing your 10 favourite products from the show, so can you just talk us through a few of them and just explain why they made it onto your list?
It's 10 years on since I had Grace, and so things have come a long way and things have changed, although funnily enough there are a couple of things that haven't changed. The first product I saw was the Chico Next to Me bedside crib, and I first saw this a few weeks ago in Mother Care. We both were like, oh, look at this is amazing. And it's got a zip down side, so you can actually attach it to the side of your bed, so you're literally next to your baby, so they're still in their own bed, but it's really helpful to see it up close. And they were demonstrating it at the baby show to show the features that it had. I like its versatility, the fact that you can undo the sides, as I've said, and so you can attach it to your side of the bed. It also has a rocking mechanism on it. It's light, so it means that you can zip up the sides, take it around, put it somewhere else during the day. And the fact that I'm hoping to be able to breastfeed means that during the night there is as little disruption as possible. So that's the first one I really liked. The next one was a product made by Dinky Dragon called the iAngel hip seat carrier. It incorporates a baby carrier, which you can do from birth. Then you place inside it a hip seat and a toddler backpack as well later on. So it's really versatile. What I was concerned about is getting to my age and carrying around a kid again. I haven't had to do that for years. And, since having a frozen shoulder a few years back, it's not as easy as it used to be. But this hip seat, it distributes the weight of the child. So it means it's going to take a lot of pressure off of us by having that on. So, I really liked it for that reason. And then Elizabeth Brown maternity wear was another one. A couple of weeks back, I wrote a post on my blog about how difficult it was to find maternity wear, particularly on high street. And what really annoys me is how expensive it is. So finding this particular company was a real good thing, and their prices are really reasonable. They had a lovely dress which I tried on for £20, but the material was lovely. It's all sourced in the UK, all made in the UK, and really comfortable. And the sizing, one of the things I find difficult is the sizing, because I'm normally a sort of 12 to 14 in normal life. And then I find I go up 2 sizes when I'm pregnant. I did with Grace, I was huge. But they've cut it so that it's actually quite generous, and you can use it to nurse as well later because the front opens really easily. So, I think their prices and the range they had were really good. And the lady who opened the business is hoping to get onto the high street eventually. At the moment, it's just online. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been basically the best part of 5 years since we last looked at baby products when Cara was born, and even then we already had a lot of the gear. Was there anything you saw that's particularly new or up and coming that prospective new parents should be getting excited about? So, I mean, what's the new in thing in the world of baby products?
I think there are quite a few things actually. Things like the eye candy. I just can't believe how many things carry on evolving. And actually, I went past a particular stand where this woman had invented a bib for bottles, which sounds really weird, but what they do is where the milk runs down the baby's chin, it can give it sore. It can go into the crevices of the chin and make it sore. And they'd actually done this thing where you can screw a sort of a little bib, little bandana into the bottle itself to stop the running of the milk going down into their chins and making them sore. And there was this other bed that I've included on my list, which was made by Baby Hub, and it's a sleep space which is a travel cot which then converts later on into a teepee, a play teepee. So
I saw that on your blog post. I thought that looked very cool.
It's great. It means there's longevity in the product, and that's what I really like. Is the same with the Eye Angel. The fact that you can carry on using them for a period of time.
Yeah, I mean that kind of element of practicality is always really helpful, isn't it? Because as you say, a lot of these products have relatively short shelf lives, don't they? And yet often they can be very, very pricey. Now, of course, all three of us are battle-hardened veterans when it comes to seeking out and buying products for a newborn baby. 3 times over in my case, although in fairness I have to say that my role in product selection and purchase was largely restricted to waving a credit card and ensuring and then lugging stuff from Mothercare, Boots and various other retailers to the car. But thinking back to your first experience of buying for little Miss, Amie, did you go crazy buying absolutely everything, or were you more restrained?
We were very, very restrained. We didn't have the luxury of being able to afford to go crazy. I had a spreadsheet that literally tracked how much we were spending on baby gear to the penny. Not least once I got made redundant the week I went on mat leave, then that really put a spanner in the works. Unexpectedly pregnant at 24, we didn't have a lot of spare cash, and we were really, really lucky that we had extended family friends that just sort of showered us with hand-me-downs. And my partner's parents had at the time a 7 and a 9-year-old. And it turns out that they're also hoarders, so they still had everything. So the only things we actually ended up buying new were the bulk of the clothes that we would need, things like diapers and all of that kind of stuff, obviously. And then we got our buggy, our car seat, and a changing table, brand new, and they were all gifts. The family basically all clubbed together and just said, if money wasn't any object, what would you be choosing? Don't compromise on your buggy or your car seat. These are 2 things especially that you should be allowed to buy what you think you want or what you need. And so we were really lucky from that perspective. We got a Moses basket for free off baby centre. Someone in the area just put it up there with a picture, and she said, I used it for 3 months and then my kid outgrew it and I just want rid. We don't have the space. And I was like, if I come and collect it, can I have it? And she was like, yeah, take it. And she filled it with newborn clothes that they didn't need anymore. I mean, she was so generous. And then another family friend gave me a high chair and a travel cot for 50 quid. And then as well, like filled the travel cot with just loads of toys they didn't want anymore. And people were really, really generous. We were lucky.
And especially these days, I think the ease of being able to give away or sell products either in online groups or on eBay and other exchanges it really facilitates that, because so many baby products get very little use, don't they? And the kind of a point you made earlier, you get so much from friends and family and hand-me-downs and so on that actually you don't need to go and buy the fancy £10 newborn baby grow from Next, when actually you can just buy a pack of plain ones from Tesco and know that family and friends will buy the fancy stuff for you as presents anyway.
Having been through it once now, the amount of baby grows you get through in a day is unreal. And we were doing laundry pretty much on a daily basis, and we were still running out of clothes and muslins and all of that. But actually, within probably the first 3 to 4 weeks, some of them we were just like, I know they're clean because I've put them through the wash enough times, but they just look grim. Babies have a lot of bodily functions. So a part of me, if I was going through it again, I really didn't mind the hand-me-downs, because, there's a couple of special things. Like I remember buying one baby grow that was pale grey with a little elephant on it. And we've kept that one especially because it was kind of nice. I mean, we bought very few, but, there was a few, and like that's the one she came home in and things like that. It's nice to have some things new and special. But yeah, muslins are muslins, and the amount of baby grows you go through, if you spent £10 on every single one, can you imagine?
It's shoes in particular. Hand-me-down shoes are the way forward. I mean, I can remember with Isaac, if we caught him just at the beginning of a growth spurt, he could shoot through a shoe size in 3 or 4 weeks easily. Donated or eBayed shoes where you could buy them nearly new for maybe a tenner, shoes that were 25 to £30 new, and then you could sell them on afterwards. And that was a real godsend. We must have saved an absolute fortune with all 3 kids by very rarely buying them new shoes for themselves.
I nearly had a heart attack the first time I went in Clark's and got her measured. We were so excited. She started walking. She's ready for her first pair of shoes. Let's go get her measured. Yay, milestone moment. I'm sorry, they are how much? Are you kidding me? And then she's going to grow out of them in a maximum of 8 weeks. What? I don't spend that money on my own shoes anymore. What are you talking about?
They grow through them so quickly, shoes in particular. I mean, why would you want to be spending 30 quid or more every, as you say, probably on average every 8 weeks as they go through one set of shoes, and they've barely worn them before they've grown out of them. Vicky, I mean, other than things like cots or cribs, nappies, strollers, and all the other obvious essential stuff, first time round with Grace or in your planning now, is there anything in particular that you absolutely could not have lived without?
There are 2 things actually, and the first thing, which I don't know whether or not will happen this time around, at the beginning when I had Grace, the day after she was born, I said, right, she's never having a dummy. No child from mine will ever have a dummy. Never say never when it comes to kids. I have to say it was a godsend. She had really bad wind. My mum said, you just need to get her a dummy. And I did, and it worked. She had it for quite a long time. We got rid of it in the end. The dummy fairies came. So I'm not going to say never on this one, but hopefully that won't happen. But if it does, it's fine. It doesn't matter. And the other thing I absolutely loved, and I will get another one for this one, is a jumperoo. I absolutely loved it. It was a brilliant source of amusement for them, and it's a brilliant source of amusement for you.
We had something similar to that, but ours was the Leapfrog Learn and Groove activity table. But they don't actually make the one we had anymore, which is such a shame. But you can get them on eBay, and it's like a donut shape. It's a bit like the jumperoo, and they sit inside the donut, and then they can spin the chair so they can access anything on the donut. And you can raise the height of it as they grow, but also they can actually once their legs are strong enough, move it around the room so they can follow you
Fantastic.
around and stuff. It was absolutely amazing. And they go for like 30 quid at most on eBay now.
I'll have
And
to go and look for one.
originally they were like 100 and 150 quid. Ours was a hand-me-down, obviously.
I remember that. You've spoken about the disco donut before. Are you working on commission?
I'm a big fan of the disco donut. So
I
much
think
so
I'll have
that
to
one
be
of my
now.
NCT friends actually went on eBay after coming to our house and bought a disco donut back in the day.
I think, our essentials, I think, must have been pretty mundane things. I think things like, kind of car seat systems. We had one of those multi-purpose mamas and papas things that, depending on your DIY skills, you could assemble as a pram or as a regular stroller or as one of those kind of rear-facing buggy things where you just, you lift the car seat out and plug it straight in. That was a real eye-opener for me, because I remember when I was growing up, car seats were things that sat in the back of the car that you physically bolted to the back seat. There was no removing them or anything like that. So I asked my wife about this earlier. The other thing she swore by was a high chair that she got from IKEA that was basically just a plastic seat and tray on metal legs.
The antelope.
That's the one. And it's the easiest thing in the world to disassemble. It fits nicely and compactly into a car boot. Because it didn't have any fancy stuff like padding, it was dead easy to clean, and you never had to worry about, bits of food getting stuck in little crevices and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we loved that.
And it's only £13. So on the other end of the spectrum, I actually agree about the antelope from IKEA. I think it is fantastic, especially for such a cheap price. But on the other end of the spectrum, we got a stocky trip trap. Again, hand-me-down. I have actually really grown to love the stocky trip trap. And she's now 3, and it'll last her till she's 12. And it gets better and better the older they get. And I actually think if we had another one and I didn't have a trip trap for any reason, I would buy another one. It's been fantastic. They now actually have a newborn attachment, so you can almost have like a rocker on the top, so then they're at your eye level, which they like. Then you put the baby seat in there for when they're weaning, and then you take that off, and it's, as I say, you pull them up to the table. For me, I actually think if you're going to buy not the antelope, as in like it's like the anti-antelope, but for me, you'd either get something like that that's £13 but does exactly what you need, or I actually think the trip trap would be worth the money, but it's not transportable.
So there you go, horses for courses. Vicky, this is second time around for you now. So is there anything different about the way that you're buying baby stuff and the way you're kind of approaching the whole thing that's different to how it was first time round with Grace?
Yeah, I mean, I feel, obviously I'm older now, and I just feel much more, less overwhelmed about the whole thing. The great thing is, I mean, when I had Grace, the internet, I didn't use it as regularly as I do now. So you're always researching, and I've got the benefit of other bloggers who've tested out products or recommending products. And I think one of the mistakes I won't make is getting poor pushchair. I mean, last time I got this one which had inflatable tyres, big mistake. And I wasn't happy with it, and we spent a lot of money on it. So I'm much more aware now, I think, of making sure that I get the right products. And also, I won't buy as many clothes brand new, we were saying earlier. At the end of the day, a baby grow is a baby grow, and I've got plenty of people in my family who will hand me down things anyway, because a lot of my brothers and sisters have had children. I kept a lot of Grace's stuff, but not lots of it. I kept some sentimental bits, but they're all girly things, and we're having a boy, so I won't dress him in a pink dress, but but yeah, I think I'll just be much more careful about what I get. And as we were saying, a lot of people buy you clothes and presents and stuff anyway. We've been much more careful about things like stocking up on nappies, making sure we get special offers of those, and we've got in our downstairs loo under the stairs, we've got baby wipes starting to stack up nappies. So it's just planning sensibly rather than just going out and buying everything.
Yeah, and I think it's you're definitely wiser and more experienced second time around, aren't you?
Oh, totally.
Just to wrap this up, I'll ask this final question of both of you. Any sage piece of advice that you would pass on to a prospective first-time parent as they embark on their pre-baby spending spree? So, Amie.
Vicky's already touched on it, but my massive piece of advice is just do your research. And I don't mean go and speak to your friends who've already got kids and ask them what they did, because you're a different family, you're different people, you've got a different budget. And also, as parents, you tend to fall in love with whatever you've got, or you really, really hate it. And so you don't end up with an unbiased view. So I'm talking about literally go out and read the articles that have actually tested loads of buggies, for example, or read, for example, car seats. There's an independent company called In Car Safety. It's either .com or .co.uk, and they will walk you through in really plain English all the different types of car seat legislation and why it's important that you follow the latest one, and all the different types, because there's 5 different categories of car seats now. And it's important that you understand buggies and car seats are the most complex, and they're the ones that will require the most. It's like buying a car, and you should treat it as such, because if you buy the wrong buggy, it's a freaking nightmare. And I've actually spoken to people who bought a buggy and didn't think to measure the size of the boot of their car, for example, and actually it didn't fit in the car, even if they took all the wheels off and everything. And it was like, okay, slightly basic, but okay, fair enough. You fell in love with a buggy. Or equally, like someone who I know lives super, super rurally, like she walks out of her house and she's in fields, and she fell in love with the Bugaboo Bee. Well, I had the Bugaboo Bee when I lived in East London. It's got teeny tiny tyres. It's the same weight as a lightweight stroller, and it's just, as soon as you take it onto grass, it almost kind of grinds to a halt. So she literally spent like over £1,000, and then was like, I can't use this. It doesn't work. Like, I needed a proper off-roading style kind of Range Rover almost buggy, and I've got this kind of Porsche 911. You know, do your research and do proper research and really understand the categories, especially for the big ticket items. It's worth your while. On that note, if reading and research isn't your thing, a lot of people also don't know that the likes of Mothercare and John Lewis actually do a free personal shopper experience, and we did this. My father-in-law set it up for us because we were a bit rabbit in the headlights and just no clue where to start. And it's absolutely fantastic. There's no obligation to buy, and they just pretty much walk you around the store and they talk you through everything, and they'll also ask you questions about your lifestyle, your budget, all of that as you go. So for example, when he walked us around the buggies, he was like, so where do you live? East London. Do you have a car? No. So, okay, so you're using public transport, so you probably want something lightweight. You're also only 5 feet tall, so I'm going to steer you away from this one and over to this one because that one's bigger than you are. And, you know, he really kind of actually, he ended up giving us kind of the top 3 that we could choose from that would suit us, our lifestyle, our budget in every product category. And that was just worth its weight in gold. And it was a free service and nobody knows it exists.
That's fab.
Really, really recommend it. They were absolutely fantastic.
That's a great tip, and you know, it's something that where there's no cost and no obligation to buy, as you say. It's you know, the kind of advice you can get there is personalised and completely invaluable. And Vicky, any top tips from you?
I would say that a lot of the second-hand shops, the baby clothes there are almost new because they don't get used for very long. You know, I've found some brilliant things in quite a few. We've got about 4 or 5 second-hand stores here in Crewcombe where I live, and they're all fab. And you can get some really nice things which look next to new. So don't go and spend a fortune on clothes. You don't need to.
So there you have it, with 5.5 kids between the 3 of us. That's the Meet the Parents guide to avoiding bankruptcy before your baby is born. So stay ahead of the game now, as they will have plenty of time to ruin your finances later in life. That's it for another episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the 3 of us online. Amie?
I'm on Twitter at Amie Caitlin, that's AmieCaitlin, and on Instagram at Finding Our Feet. And if you want to check out my blog, it's findingourfeet.co.uk.
And Vicky?
My blog is Verily Victoria Vocalises. The URL is vevivos.com, and you'll find me on Twitter and Instagram at Vic Welton, Welton.
And you can find me at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com and across social media as @ThatchamDad. You can download this podcast on iTunes and on Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. Do please give us a follow on Twitter at Parents Podcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. And if you're an iTunes user, do please visit the Meet the Parents podcast page and leave a star rating and a review. It helps make the podcast visible to new listeners, so any support you can give us is greatly appreciated. Anyway, thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.